All right, welcome in. It is Friday. It's time for full court press. I was joking with Vino. You can see my bed in the background. I am in my hotel room in Mattoon, Illinois, very much in the middle of nowhere. This is the only way I could set this up. So, but you know what? That's where Rob Vino, that's where I got home. UC Irvine very late last night. I was like delirious watching that game because I had been up for well over 24 hours. And I was like, I must be dreaming. There's no way they didn't just call a hook on the Hawaii player. But sure enough, they didn't. They actually called it a foul on the defensive player. I had to stay up for another 20 minutes. But thankfully for me, Rob Vino, I have 3 straight wins, all in overtime. Yeah. That never happens for me. I go down into the lobby here at the beautiful Hilton Garden Inn, Mattoon, Illinois, and all they have is Monster Energy. So do you think I settled for that? Absolutely not. -2 degrees this morning. I went out and found a bang. We got to just keep it consistent. Staying with the peach mango bang for the 3rd day in a row. And there's a lot of good games for Friday. Some games even moved to today. So I'm excited to talk about the slate with you. How was your night? Last night, we got the parlay home. You were up late too. Big second half in Northridge to get the parlay home.
Yeah, and it was nice to see that UC Davis was running right with Northridge first half. I think Northridge closed that half with 41 or 42. But then right out of the gate in the second half, they came alive. They were into the mid-60s, I think before the 10-minute mark even hit. So it looked pretty good because the pace was there, the scoring was there, and, of course, our favorite black background comes through again as Northridge gets into the mid-90s. So good job by us, and maybe we will look to repeat this thing here today. Like you said, pretty decent card here, Adam, I have to say.
Listen, you hear it in baseball all the time. Hitters love shooting against or hitting against the great batter's eye. Why would it be any different for basketball players, right? Yeah. You can't tell me that that's not a thing, and that's not why that's there. And Northridge, no sweat for your side, for your leg of the parlay. Big sweat for my leg, but Irvine gets it done. And Rob Vino, we're basically a 2-teamer away from being back even on the parlay. So that's what we're going to go with today, because tomorrow I'm sure we're going to do a 3-teamer with Kelly. So we're going to find a 2-team winner for you again today to get that parlay right back around even for the year, which, listen, it's January 30th. That's like we're doing a parlay every day. If we can come out ahead on these, that's extremely impressive. I see Bayou in the chats like telling me, his Florida Atlantic theory may very well be true. They get crushed by Memphis last night. So appreciate you, Brandon Young. Brandon says great stuff yesterday. Yeah, we're just trying to find winners every day. There's 365 Division I college basketball teams. There's got to be something out there that we can make some money on. So, Rob Vino, I'm going to go to you for this one. It's a huge game tonight, but can we make any money in East Lansing with a top 10 battle? Michigan State, big one in the Big Ten.
It seems early, Adam, like somebody feels like you can make money with the over in this game. 145 all the way up to a couple of stray 148s out there. 147.5, the predominant number. I'm not so sure I agree, but I could understand as somebody making that argument, legitimate argument. You could, counter. But let's start with what's really going to happen here. I mean, let's face it. Tom Izzo is going to do or attempt to do what Tom Izzo's attempted to do to teams that want to play quick pace for however many years his career has spanned. I lost track at this point. Izzo's been there so long. But Michigan State's going to try and control tempo, and Michigan's going to try and run, and we'll see who wins that battle. Beyond that, I would say this, Adam, as good as Michigan State is as a rebounding team, and they're tremendous. Statistically, they're number 1, I think, in the conference in defensive rebounding, so second chance points are hard to come by. But Michigan does have the size advantage here on this team. Michigan's front line is bigger than Michigan State's. I think Michigan State is a lot more energy, work ethic, et cetera, et cetera. We know Izzo's players over the years. there's a couple of things here. First of all, when they got Lendenborg from UAB, what a coup that was for Michigan, because Ken Palm actually has him listed as one of the 10 best players in the nation right now. Wouldn't argue that. Very versatile frontline player. Going to be important here tonight. I'm sure that Michigan State has their sights set on him. I kind of feel like this game comes down to the point guards. Michigan State, as good as Jeremy Fears is, Michigan State has had turnover issues, bad turnover issues. And Michigan can turn you over. So that'll be important here. The rebounding might negate itself. I don't know that Michigan State's going to get the great rebounding edge that they always get against other teams. And then comes the other point guard, Elliot Cadeau from North Carolina, who's been absolutely nailing it from three this season. And if Michigan gets these threes to fall, we've seen this before. You have to defend them at all three levels. And I don't know. I would say that Michigan might be the toughest cover defensively that Michigan State has had all season long for the amount of things that they have to defend against this team. To me, Michigan's the better team. And Michigan State is obviously, well, I won't say obviously, but I will say with Tom Izzo, they're always in these types of games very, very feisty, so to speak, and that can win out here. Really tough game for me sidewise, Adam, and I don't know that I agree here with this total being pushed up. That kind of indicates somebody out there thinks that Michigan State will be forced to run at least a little bit with Michigan and get this game open court. I don't think Tom Izzo wants this game 75-75 or 74-74 to get it up and over. He may not be able to resist it. I'm not sure. If I had to make a play in this game, I think I would take the Michigan side at -1, just because I think that rebounding edge on both ends that Michigan State usually holds such an advantage in probably is negated quite a bit here by Michigan's bigs. That's also a really good rebounding team.
Yeah, listen, I remember walking out of the Breslin Center with Brian Power earlier this year, and credit to BP, who was quite a few Sparta IPAs deep at this point, but still sharp as a tack as always for him. And he goes, Trig, he goes, Michigan State, they just won that game. They went 1 for 14 from three, and they just beat that Arkansas team, which was a good win for them. They went 1 for 14 from three. The reason I bring that up is because they've actually turned into a pretty respectable shooting team from where they were earlier in the year, right? Like there was a couple of games earlier in the year where they could not hit an outside shot. And, going into tonight's game, as I just try to get the most updated numbers, I mean, 3-point percentage this year is now 35.9% as a team, which is a top 75 mark in the league. And that, of course, is included. Like the slow shooting start for them is included. But why is that, Rob? Their floor spacing is better. That's all Tom Izzo. Listen, Tom Izzo, he's still a college basketball coach, right? He's not just going to the portal and bringing, new roster in every year. That's why he's so frustrated with the current state of college basketball, because he wants to get guys in, develop his own guys, and build a team, which amazingly he's been able to somewhat do in the current landscape. But I think that's why you see a team like Michigan State as they clean some of that stuff up. Because again, I left that Arkansas-Michigan game, which was like the first weekend of the season, and I was like, man, Arkansas is the better of these two teams. No question about it. Probably because they had more talent, right? Like just talent at the time. But the more I watch Michigan State play, the more I'm coming around to them being like a legitimate top 10 team. Now, what I can't get down with here, Rob, is the fact, and this goes back to our discussion on Tuesday when we talked Michigan State, Nebraska, I think the pendulum has finally swung in the value department, where it was like Michigan cannot cover these big numbers. Nebraska ends up being without multiple starters, and Michigan still doesn't cover. I can't. When was the last time they covered a spread? It's been a while, right? Like it's been maybe since the USC game, which was a long time ago at this point. But here you go. Now you don't cover against Nebraska on Tuesday, and suddenly all you have to do is win the game. I'm convinced if like they come out and steamroll Nebraska, or they're covering some of these big numbers, you're probably looking at Michigan laying like 3 here. maybe even 3.5. So the fact that you can get Michigan -1 kind of feels like a bargain on the number. But for me, I listen, that's a great, I've now been to the Breslin Center twice. That's going to be awesome. It's going to be a tremendous atmosphere. I want to like Sparty because I do think that they're better than they get credit for. But I think the books have sucked the value out at this point. They swung the pendulum too far. And now at Michigan -1, I just can't. I would need more there. I would need at least 3 to play Michigan State.
Yeah, to your point, it's 7 straight non-covers by Michigan after the Nebraska game. So 0-7, covered 1 Big Ten game all season long. When you set this thing virtually at a pick'em, it's hard to not play Michigan just because of their versatility, Adam. There's another, like I said before, the Michigan State turnover problems, they really have to hope those don't creep up tonight because Michigan will force you to turn it over. And I think Michigan State's, again, the advantages that they hold, their strengths are pretty much neutralized by Michigan having identical strengths. So we're going to see home floor could be the answer here. It is oftentimes in college basketball, the answer to who wins and who loses. We'll see if Dusty May's team is fazed by this environment or not. Probably not, but we're going to see. Like I said, for those who haven't seen the UAB kid play last year or this year, just fantastic. And Michigan at so many levels, just so good. I'm really surprised that Elliot Cadeau is shooting the way he is on a consistent basis this year, but he's been phenomenal for Michigan.
2 top 5 defensive teams, 2 top 10 rebounding teams. It very well may be who takes better care of the basketball. Both of these teams will turn it over. I would say that that's one of the weaknesses you could point out on both sides. It might just be who's more composed here. And again, for me, I think it's going to be easier for Michigan State to be composed on their home floor. If it comes down to shooting the ball, I think they shoot it a little bit better at home. But man, you're just the books are not giving you anything there. I mean, they're really pricing in that home run home spot, in my opinion. I feel like you should be getting at least 3 with the Spartans. And last I checked, we're still at 1.5 here, I believe, right? Still down.
Yeah, and I'll say really quick. I do see a lot of ones out there, Adam. When's the last time we saw a Michigan team total listed at 73.5? I mean, that's 12 to 15 points less. There's been some in the 90s. 73.5 is a low number to ask of Michigan, but that shows you the respect for the Michigan State defense and the Michigan State home floor here.
It'll be a good one. There's a lot of good ones tonight. So Drake Dimes DM'd me before the show, and he always jumps in and donates. So he said, "Hey, I'm gonna miss the show live today. Can you please talk Grand Canyon Boise for me?" And I see some people in the chat looking for that game as well. So let's head out to the Mountain West. Rob, I told you I would have. Thankfully, I've been pretty good this week. About throwing games out that would have lost. Although yesterday I ended up only going with 1 play. It hit with UC Irvine. Yesterday I would have had a decent. I probably of the 5 games I threw out, or the 6, I think I would have gone 4-2. But Rob, I told you it was. I was spared a what would have been a generational crash out if I had ended up playing Grand Canyon the other night, which I was very close to doing. Can you just walk me through what happened in the final 1 second of that game? Because I missed the actual live ending of regulation.
Yeah, there was a whistle blown with 0.8 on the clock for a 3-shot foul, and the clock ran all the way to 0, and the referees went back and checked the tape, checked for the foul, checked for the time, decided that there was truly a 3-point shooting foul, and there actually were 0.8 of a second left. So they reset the clock from 0. Grand Canyon actually had thought they won the game because the clock ran out. And then Nevada went to the line and made all 3 free throws, got it to overtime, and win 66-60, which is, and if we talk about UNLV Nevada later, I'll probably reference what I'm going to say now into that game as well. For Grand Canyon, that would have been a monster win, Adam, because they did it without two of the most key components in their backcourt. Brian Moore, who's their point guard and their premier playmaker, doesn't play in that game. Caleb Shaw, arguably their best three-point shooter, doesn't play in that game, won't play tonight. They're really nervous about Moore as well. I saw Bryce Drew said maybe, we hope. He did practice Thursday, but it's a hamstring injury. And who the heck knows how long that lasts for Moore. So a couple of things here. The fact that they almost won that game in Nevada is pretty good on Grand Canyon's part. And I don't know what it says about Nevada having to struggle like that against a team without two of their best backcourt players. Both get over 20 minutes. Like I say, Moore is the playmaker on this team. So let's move that into tonight against Boise State, which has been, for Leon Rice and his style, this has been a really high-scoring team in league play. And they've maintained the fantastic defense that Leon Rice has generally preferred to teach his team throughout his career. This is a very tough matchup, I think, for Grand Canyon. If Moore doesn't go, honestly, Boise's probably the right side here. As good as Grand Canyon's half-court defense is, et cetera, they do have some flaws in this team. Scoring would be one of them against the Boise State team. That the building will be electric. Boise will have to fight that off. Grand Canyon's first year in the Mountain West, so it's a place you're unfamiliar with, right? Your first trip in. What is it like here on a Friday night? But to me, the personnel gap here would be huge if, in fact, Brian Moore doesn't play. And I don't know that they can, Nevada, that offense is not really good. And it showed up that night. But Grand Canyon was able to defend them. I don't know that they can defend Boise for 40 minutes here and at the same time be able to score enough to outscore Boise. So my lean here is to Boise State. My other lean is toward the under, because in my estimation, if there's any way Grand Canyon can win this game, they have to just lock down defensively, not foul, because they're a high volume foul team, and Boise State gets to the line a bunch. I think I saw this morning they were number 2 or number 1 inside Mountain West play at getting to the line free throw rate. So Grand Canyon is going to have to play defense without fouling. I do think if you're going to be without Shaw for a couple more games here, but if you're without Moore tonight as well, I would lean Boise State in this game.
Yeah, so the one thing you left out when you were talking about the Nevada game is Grand Canyon was plus 4.5, and they ended up losing by 6 in overtime, which would have again sent me. But thankfully, I was not on that game. I was like, I had secondhand anger for anyone that had Grand Canyon in that game, because they deserve to win. They should have won the game. And as you pointed out, they did it without Shaw and without Moore. Now I think they're going to be without both of them here tonight. But Rob, this is what I would look for in this game. If both of those guys get announced out, because it's the thing with like the books and betting and stuff like that is like sometimes the stuff is priced in, but then it'll be like they'll announce something we already know, and then the line will move again, right? And it's like if there's some egregious move toward if like let's say Boise gets slammed here, right, and takes money from the point where it is now, and suddenly that thing steams 3 or 4 points, I'd be willing to play back with Grand Canyon at that point, because I think that, well, first of all, go back to the first meeting. Grand Canyon demolished them up in Boise. I don't think that game was ever close. Going off memory, but I'm pretty sure they won by 20. Here's the problem with Grand Canyon with those two out against most teams. It's going to put you in a scenario where you're basically playing 6 guys, right? Like when you take those 2 guys out, they don't have depth beyond like 8 or 9. They're probably playing 6 guys for the majority of the game. You might steal a minute or 2 here with like the 9th, 10 guy off a bench, but mostly that's going to be 6 guys. Boise's not like insanely athletic. That's something I noticed. I got to see a Boise State game at the Pit last year. When they played New Mexico, and something I had been thinking about for a while kind of like came to fruition in that game. And I started to look for it a little bit more. And I'm just like, boy, this team's they have no athletes. They have some really good basketball players on the Boise State roster, but they lack athletes. So they're not like exactly the team, in my opinion, that's going to exploit like a depth type thing, like where it's just like, they're not like so overly athletic that they're going to run you into the ground. So I actually think Grand Canyon might still be able to function a little bit, even without two of their best players. But the key here, Rob, is going to be the market overreacting, right? Which I don't think has happened to this point. I'm just trying to toggle back to the current line here. So yeah, like we're still sitting at Grand Canyon -1, -1.5. If this flipped and then suddenly I could catch like 2.5 with Grand Canyon at home, which is going to be a tremendous atmosphere. I got to go there last year. Awesome. One of the best I've seen for like just they are hyped from, they actually set up a tailgate right in front of the arena. So because of course it's Phoenix, it's warm. You can do stuff like that, but they've got like tents set up for the kids and like cornhole and like all the games and like drinks and stuff. And it's all pre-set up. So they just come in and hang out, and you can hang out like hours and hours before the game and then go in. Yeah, it's going to be a tremendous atmosphere. I think if you just randomly gave me an extra 3 points with Grand Canyon because their two guys are out, which again, the books already pretty much know this, in my opinion. So it would just be extra. I think I'd take Grand Canyon in that scenario and roll the dice because I don't think Boise can fully exploit those guys being out. Bayou says this is a classic Friday smash spot with the Lopes. Don't overthink it. Man, Mountain West, tough to win on the road in that conference. It's always been tough to win on the road in that conference. And they fit right in with that narrative. That's the full marks for home court there, Rob.
Yeah, and I do wonder, again, we spoke a little bit about the unfamiliarity with the arena for Boise State. And I do wonder a little bit about the unfamiliarity with Grand Canyon as a team the first time around. Leon Rice now has a chance to go back, make some adjustments to what happened, what went wrong in that case. Shaw and Moore were pretty significant contributors in that game as far as minutes are concerned. And like you say, they go a little bit deeper than some teams still. That offensive performance the other night, I guess you could look at it two ways. And either we respect Grand Canyon for going into Reno and playing as well as they did without two key components in the backcourt. And again, it's a cluster injury, right? It's two pieces of the backcourt. It's not one backcourt, one front court where maybe you could overcome it. Do you respect that more, or do you disrespect Nevada for not being able to take advantage on your home floor? It is kind of crazy too. So we'll get to that maybe a little later.
Yeah, this is a theme for me today. There's so I guess we'll do the promo now. I am like 95% sure that I'll have a 5%er today. I haven't put anything out yet, but it's I'm trying to confirm some info on a couple of games because like Grand Canyon, I mean, we get to this point in the year and there's guys it's can be walking wounded a little bit. And so I'm just kind of I've got my eye on a couple. I have a good there. Well, without a doubt, I'll be playing something, but there's a good chance it's going to try to run this streak up a little bit tonight, Rob, and go 5%er, which means you should check out mine and Rob's joint package, double the CBB firepower. It's Friday, so it means it's the weekend package. So I mean, if you're into like cost per game and keeping it low, this would be the day to do it. Because, of course, you'll then get Saturday when there's a trillion games, morning till night. So check that out. Again, I haven't locked anything in yet, but, I will be maybe even before the end of this show. Maybe I'll throw another one out for free like we did yesterday and the day before. Maybe I can't throw another one out for free. I've given a lot away this week, Rob. So, maybe I got to maybe won't do that. But, hey, we're here to share opinions, and ultimately, like, the best compliment I've received this year has nothing to do with picking winners and losers. It's the DM I got the other day where it was just like, hey, like you got me to look at something a different way than I was looking at it. And I was able to make a good bet or in Swizz's case, not make a bet. He says, good call on Lemoyne. I'm glad I changed my bet after listening to you. Yeah. I mean, listen, it's so hard to know everything about every school. I certainly don't. but like I live 25 minutes from Lemoyne. So I'm probably going to just be a little bit more tuned in. And some of the folks in the chat, whoever had New Jersey Institute of Technology yesterday, great call. That was someone in the chat. So yeah, I think we, that's really the point of this show. So appreciate you guys for that. All right, Rob Vino, let's get back out. Well, we're going to do this one. Your boy is going to be back in the car today, not nearly as long as I was yesterday. So I pretty much have a whole day to do my thing before this game. But I will be at Shape Beats Arena tonight, I think is how you say it. St. Louis. I'm about 2 hours from St. Louis right now. And that's where I'll be tonight for what some are calling one of the biggest home games in St. Louis history, from just a hype, anticipation standpoint. The game is sold out, and that's a big arena for the A10, 10,400 seats. It's already sold out. And I will be in the building for Dayton, St. Louis. Rob Bino, if Stanford doesn't hit a crazy 3 against St. Louis, they're one of the unbeaten teams that maybe is getting more attention than they're getting right now. Although I think at least in the college basketball space, everyone's well informed about St. Louis basketball. I saw this number. I thought it was pretty big, though. Do you think this number's too big, Rob Bino?
It depends what you think of Dayton at this point in time. We know what we think of St. Louis. We know what St. Louis is capable of. What do we think of Dayton, especially off of this recent 3 games? Can you lose to LaSalle? Can you lose to St. Joe's? Can you lose to Rhode Island, all in consecutive fashion, and be considered any good this year? I'm not sure Dayton is any good. Obviously, you can mask some of your problems inside the A10, and your overall statistics can look a little bit better than what you actually are. But this is going to be tough. I almost thought, the other night we talked about St. Louis GW, right? And I think you were making the case for GW as a dog. And they did come through as a dog. And, 2020 hindsight is always going to be a winner. But in retrospect, I think to myself, was there any potential that St. Louis was looking ahead to the Dayton game on Friday? Now, you shouldn't, because GW is probably more of a threat in the standings. Or at least they're of equal threat. So you shouldn't. And maybe that doesn't even come into play here. But I would say that I don't have as much respect for Dayton at this point in time as maybe I would have earlier this season. Anthony Grant generally is a coach that has a pretty solid defense, but some of these numbers over the last few games inside the league tell me that St. Louis is going to score tonight. I guess the question becomes, can they score enough to win by margin? Early money doesn't think so. Early money's on Dayton plus the 10.5. But of course, I don't look at sides as much as I look at totals. And they're showing me a number of 80.5 in this game for St. Louis. And I'm thinking to myself, that might be a spot where I have to pull the trigger on St. Louis to get to 81 at home against this team, because Dayton, one of their assets over the course of time, Adam, has been their ability to slow games down. We talk about teams that can frustrate fast-paced teams with their slow-down offense, with their pedestrian style. But you've got to be effective at doing that. And by effective, I mean offensively, you've got to be efficient. You've got to be able, in order to keep the game slow, you have to be able to score. You have to keep yourself in the game so that you're not in chase mode. If Dayton gets into chase mode here, that feeds into St. Louis even more. To me, that's problematic for the Dayton side. Dayton doesn't shoot the 3 very well. That's problematic for the Dayton side. And at home, my theory on these home teams, when there's a contrast in tempo, I always believe the home team can control or can enforce their will, their style, their preferred method on the opponent for more than half the game. And I just feel like Dayton could get into trouble here. I don't want to lay the double-digit number, but I do think I like to play St. Louis open over 80.5 points here. To me, this should be a game where they find mid-80s. I just, I'm not sure that Dayton has – Mike Tyson used to have an old saying, everybody thinks they have a chance until they get punched in the mouth. And I think Dayton feels like they have a chance, but it's hard to simulate what St. Louis does in your practice session. And maybe they have to get punched in the mouth early. Maybe the better play is early with St. Louis as I talk here. Maybe Dayton gets overwhelmed a little bit early and then adjusts. Anthony Grant's a good head coach, but in some way, shape, or form, I like the St. Louis point scoring angle here.
I actually think I would, if you like Dayton. So here's my thing. Like just if you're just talking numbers, okay, this opened 11.5, 12. If you're just talking, I'm just going to bet numbers, not teams. I can't stand that saying. I want to fight every time I hear someone say that. It's a ridiculous saying, but I understand being like that number is off. Okay, like for example, I've got St. Louis minus 8.75 here. Okay, that's quite a bit off of the 12 opener. But I am in no rush to just take the 12 with Dayton because my number's off, because I think there's a lot more to it than just betting a number. I think there's a whole handicap, right? There's so many different variables that come into play. And a lot of the variables, like you can't just not acknowledge the huge home crowd, the fact that Dayton might just be bad, right? Look at the last 3 games for Dayton. Listen, Dayton still gets a lot of credit for the name on the front of the jersey because they're good in this league every year. But this team just lost to LaSalle. They just lost to St. Joe's, and then they lose a home game to Rhode Island. This might just be a bad team. Bad relative to what the market typically views Dayton as. So I'm not saying Dayton is a bad team. They're still 14-7. They're not a bad basketball team, but they're not a contender in this league this year. And that, that just might be what we're dealing with, right? Like St. Louis, even though they could still cover a bad number, right? Like if they're, and here's what I'll go. I brought Bayou's comment up because he says maybe Dayton's a first half play plus 6.5. Dayton's going to have to be overly physical to hang in this game. That's what you can do a little bit to St. Louis because, as good as they are, you still have Robbie Avila. That's something I was critical of St. Louis last year when, they hadn't realized the Josh Schertz, Robbie Avila, it was still year one and they were still trying to figure it out, is I felt like they were soft at times. And if Dayton comes in and really competes in that regard, they can hang around. So the reason I kind of agree with Bayou is it's like, well, let's see if the physicality works out early, because if Dayton gets into foul trouble or if St. Louis finds a way to sort of withstand that pressure, move the ball, hit a couple shots, that it could get out of hand late. So I don't mind the look from Bayou. If you like Dayton, maybe look at a first half play, because I think over the course of 40 minutes, Rob, I start to agree with you, or like I think St. Louis is going to pick them apart eventually. They run such good offense. They're going to have the 10,500 people, pushing them ahead. Like I do think that there might be a knockout punch at some point for St. Louis. Now, does it mean it ends up being more than a 13-point margin? I guess it depends on how the game ebbs and flows, right? Because, hey, let's say Dayton gets up early. Maybe the knockout punch is to come back and win by 5, right? Like that's very possible. So to me, I couldn't really find my way onto a side because of that. I do think there's value in the Dayton number, especially where it was. I think St. Louis is just better. I don't really necessarily want to fade Dayton coming off 3 straight losses, but this St. Louis team, they might just be like generations, might be a historically good St. Louis Billikens team. And what we know about historically good teams, Rob, is they tend to outperform the market, right? It's almost like you can't make the number high enough sometimes. So I'm okay with your angle, maybe trying to just take the outcome out of it and looking for points, because I think St. Louis they weren't super efficient against George Washington the other night.
Right.
The game before, I had buddies that went to that game. They were at the bar at halftime in Olean. I think St. Louis was up 37-13 at one point. So if you get that St. Louis team, you're probably getting your team total over.
Yeah, it's just looking at St. Louis road efforts in the A-10 this year, Adam. How do you go to Loyola and only win by 2, escape with your lives? Loyola stinks. And then how do you go to LaSalle, like we've said twice now, and lose outright? And then follow it up by going to St. Joe's. And I realize St. Joe's has played a lot better lately. That basketball team could be a lot of addition by subtraction. But then you go to St. Joe's on the heels of a loss to LaSalle and lose in St. Joe's. These road efforts, they did beat Duquesne by 6. Credit them for that. And Duquesne's a pace type team, much like St. Louis. But they just haven't been good. And they're allowing a little more than they generally would. So I do like to, I'd rather play, just my line of thinking, I'd rather play total here and probably team total with St. Louis figuring at some point. As inefficient as they were against GW, they scored 79. And so that just shows you the capability of this team's offense.
All right, Rob Vino, do you have an idea of what you want to use for the parlay yet, or are you still? Because I'll let you go if you know.
Yeah, no, I've got 3 ideas. Let me just pick the best idea of all. In fact,
sounds like a good plan.
You know, maybe, you know what? I'll just go because sometimes you can overthink it. And I'd rather just go. And I've done this before, and hopefully we capitalize here with this team total. Like I said yesterday, get back to what I have been doing best with these team totals. But I'm going to go back to the well one more time with the Sacred Heart team total over. It's an in-state game against Quinnipiac. Obviously, for Sacred Heart, you need to have pace of the game. You can't have a slow team. You have to have a quick team, which Quinnipiac is. So the pace, the additional opportunities should be there. We've talked enough about this team with Anquan Hill and whatnot. The last time I think I used them on the show, they did get there. And then there was one instance right after that where they didn't get there. But I think this is a real high-scoring game. Obviously, the total indicates that 156.5 is your number here. Team total for Sacred Heart in this instance is only 73.5. I just feel like there's enough opportunity in a high-paced game for a team that's shown a lot of offense since Hill has been inserted into the lineup. There were other options to try here in this game, including the Princeton Cornell full game total over, which may make my card today. We'll find out as I look into it a little bit further. But at this point in time, I think the best way to go is for me to take Sacred Heart team total. The number just seemed low to me at 73.5. I feel like there's 75 plus in this game for them. So that'll be my half of the parlay, Adam. Sacred Heart team total will go back to the well, I think, for a second time on this show. Sacred Heart over 73.5.
Yeah, don't look now, Rob Vino. Sacred Heart is won 4 in a row. And they're playing, and I think a lot of it coincides with Anquan Hill coming back. So he actually came back in the Marist game back in early January. That was a game where, listen, there's no shame in losing to Marist this year. They actually covered that game. Sacred Heart was plus 5.5. Marist won by 4. Very interesting to me that the second game Hill was back, he had 21 and Sacred Heart only scored 60 as a team against this Quinnipiac team. So that I was trying to quickly pull that box score up, but I would imagine Sacred Heart just had a abysmal 3-point shooting performance in that game. I don't know if you have it in front of you right there, but they must have just
10 of 27. And you're right. Hill came off the bench in that one. He played 33 minutes, went 6 of 10 from 2, but it was the first game acclimating him back in. 10 of 27 from 3. But how about this? Only 39% from 2-point range in that game.
Yeah,
so the overall shooting was 21 of 55, which isn't great.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I can tell you that they were fully acclimated the game after that, because that was they came to Albany and dropped 86 on Siena and dominated pretty much start to finish. I mean, they led the majority of that game. So since then, even though it hasn't always been like the huge offensive performance, now the game that you're referencing that you came on and gave out on this show was the Ryder game where they dropped 105 on Ryder. I remember you gave that out on the show. But they're still winning games, right? And yeah, you can look at over the weekend, only winning by 1 against Niagara, only winning by 3 against Canisius. But this was a team coming into the year that I thought would be pushing the top of the MAC standings. I love Anthony Latine. I think he's a great coach. I really like what they did in the offseason. The problem for them is they play no defense at times It's really not scoring the basketball. Their problem is mostly on the defensive end. And where I'm going with this is Sacred Heart, before that 4-game win streak, was 1-6 in conference play. Now they're 5-6. They're trending in the right direction. I would not be at all surprised if they hung around and had a chance in this game. And so it's probably a little bit correlated with your team total. But, 8.5, 9, whatever this is right now, I wouldn't be dying to lay that with Quinnipiac. You got a little bit of a revenge based on the losing the earlier season matchup, and Sacred Heart has won 4 straight, and they're just playing. They play such better ball with Anquan Hill in the lineup. So even though they might not play much defense, I think they can score enough to cover. And if they score enough to cover, you're probably going to hit your team total. So I'm very much with you with how you're looking at this one.
Yeah, the last piece of that real quick here, Adam, the last 4 teams that they've played that they've beat, those are 4 of the 5 slowest tempos in MAC play. I mean, if you can get the 71, 69, and then 105 and 86, of course, are better than 73. But the 71 and 69 over the weekend against Canisius and Niagara might as well be, 77 against a fast tempo team. Like Sacred Heart is finally going to get an opponent that wants to get into their style of game. So I would think that over 73.5 is a pretty good look here with Sacred Heart team total.
Yeah, and it wasn't only Hill. Like they had, I think Ralph Byer missed a game at one point. They had Jan Farrell out for a game at one point. So collectively, it seems like they're for the most part healthy at this time of year. And again, I think a healthy Sacred Heart team, I was certain would be like a top 4 or 5 team in this league this year. So they're a play on, in my opinion, just in general. And then so I don't see why they wouldn't qualify for that, getting this number of points here. And for our sake, hopefully they just get the points. If they lose, they can lose, they can give up 100 today. If they get their points, we're good. That's all we care about. All right, let's go back in. I gotta get. I see a couple people in the chat wanted this game. Joey Cheese texted me off air. Although actually he was in here earlier asking for some Ivy League. Princeton Cornell is the game that the chat wants to talk about. And I've been critical of Cornell this year, Rob Bino. This is not the Brian Earl Cornell teams of the past decade prior to 2 years ago when he left. So I've been out on them a little bit, but pretty nice win for them last time out. So I actually gave them out on this show. I said it was a great matchup for them against Brown, and they would absolutely destroy Brown, which they did. For me, it was a little bit surprising that they were kind of able to do the same thing to Harvard. So now you have Cornell coming in on back-to-back wins, and they're at home, but they're at home against a Princeton team that I'm not really sure of. I don't know. I knew they wouldn't be what they've been the last couple of years because, of course, Xavier Lee goes to Florida. Caden Pierce takes a year off. So I don't fully know what to think about Princeton. So Princeton, Cornell, do you see easy buckets in this game? Because that happens in Cornell games sometimes as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally the way you look at Cornell games, right? Not only will they score, because they score at a rate as good as most teams in the country, but they're just not a defensive-minded team whatsoever. A couple of numbers here that I had from this morning. Cornell, the three-point shooting here, 12th best in the country, obviously bread and butter of that offense, but 361 out of 365 in three-point defense, which opens the door for Princeton a little bit, which is almost a 50% shot distribution, three-point shooting team in their games away from home, which is interesting when you look at these splits, Adam. And the only reason why I looked that up this morning is because you've brought up home road splits during the week for some of these teams. And when I checked Princeton and I see that they shoot 49% of their shots on the road come from three-point range, and Cornell doesn't defend it, then you have to figure that there's going to be a ton of open looks. And, players with open looks, I don't care how rotten the team might be at shooting the three, kids with open looks, eventually that many, they're going to make a bunch. So to me, this game's set up as an over. I had mentioned that earlier, that was one of my choices to go with as half of our parlay. But I can safely assume that Cornell is going to get theirs. And then if the matchup dictates that Princeton's going to get a lot of open threes, and that's what they like, and the other team doesn't defend them, then, the assumption becomes Princeton will get theirs. Then I look at this number. There's games where Cornell is listed in the 170s. And here we get away with a 161, which to me, Cornell game total baseline is kind of cheap in my estimation. Cornell should always be at least about a 164, 165. So this particular matchup, you talked before about how you want to fight every time you hear people saying we bet numbers. Well, this is one of those instances where the matchup, you can run your numbers and come up with a side and total pretty easy. It's generic. It's mathematics. But when you dig into the matchup a little bit and realize that Princeton's probably going to be able to score above their season average here tonight, just because of the way this game will be played, because of the strengths and weaknesses, the advantages, disadvantages, I think this game gets over 161.
Muted, sorry. I'm going to do it. I'm going to put Princeton in the parlay plus 5.5. I don't like this team typically. Like and when I say I don't have like or dislike for any of these teams. I hope they all, do well and put people in the seats, and it's good.
How about Albany?
All that. Yeah, I don't really care for them, or Iona. Albany, Iona. Listen, those are the exceptions, but Jadwin Gym's a great building. I've been there. It's a really cool place. This game's at Newman Arena, Ithaca, New York. But listen, Princeton, I think you're right, Rob. This is not the worst matchup for Princeton. It is. So something Princeton doesn't do particularly well is move the ball, which could theoretically be an issue against a team that presses, and you kind of have to move it around to break the press. But they also don't turn it over a ton. And that's huge against Cornell. If you can possess the ball and not just like cough it up and let them get these, because what happens is if Cornell forces a turnover, it essentially turns into a transition open three. So what they do a lot of times, they'll turn over and then they'll get a good look from three, and that's where they can accumulate points. If you're not letting them do that, you can break their press a little bit. There's a lot of easy points. I've talked about this multiple times this year. There's a lot of easy points on the back end of this Cornell zone, where if you have ball handlers and you can break their pressure and you can just get, into the front court, they're not that good defensively. And I don't think that, I know they're still playing the same style that Brian Earl played, but this is not nearly as polished of a Cornell team as you've had a couple of years ago when Earl, who's now at William and Mary, was building this program. I've been on record calling them Timu Cornell, Rob Vino. It's like the Timu version of Cornell. It works sometimes, but it's just not, it's just not the name brand Brian Earl product. So my number here, I'm glad that the chat and Joey Cheese brought this to my attention. My number's 2.9. So that's enough for me. That's a pretty big edge there, just from a number standpoint. I've been to Newman Arena a few times. I don't bump Cornell tremendously for any sort of crazy home court. So Colin Gregory says Princeton was a look for me. He's going to look at Princeton first half +3. Yeah, I prefer the full game. I think there's more value in the +5.5 full game. Bayou says if they could keep it low and slow, they could win. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Princeton could absolutely win this game, no question about it. Don't make no mistake. This is not a good Cornell team. This is a very average Cornell team that's going to look really good at certain times against teams that just don't handle the way they play particularly well. Princeton is the type of team that I think could handle the way they play. So this will be my leg of the parlay. Princeton +5.5 is going to be my parlay leg. Robino, I have to go to that. So I read the comments every day. If you miss any of the show, as always, like and subscribe. Or I could jump the gun there, asking for the like and subscribe. It's on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. We would appreciate it if you liked and subscribed when you're over there. And while you're over there, if you leave us a comment, we will likely answer the comment. And one of the comments was, you guys don't talk enough Horizon League basketball. And I was like, hey, you know what? There's no hate toward the Horizon. I let the Horizon's a great league, but you guys got to show up and ask for the games, because we're going to talk about the games that you bring up. That's the one thing about this show, not scripted. We're just doing it on the fly. We prepare nothing. I mean, we prepare, but we don't prepare what we're going to talk about outside of that first game. So you got to show up and ask for the game. So what the one it looks like people want to talk about, I'm going to pick the one that I see more comments on, and that's going to be Doug Gottlieb's Green Bay Phoenix. Rob Bino, I feel like I was ahead of the curve on Gottlieb being a good coach. Suddenly everyone's like, hey, maybe he knows what he's doing. And I said, coming into this year, I said, he learned from that first season what it takes to be a Division I head basketball coach. I think he came into this year a much better coach than he was last year. And now he's starting to get some results. He's starting to get some wins. I would go as far to say, Rob Bino, that he's turning this program around a little bit. Green Bay 7-4 in Horizon League play. They're only 2 wins off of the top spot in the Horizon. They're going to get another one tonight. I don't think they're losing to Cleveland State. The question is, will it be by margin? Do you have anything for us, Cleveland State, Green Bay?
Yeah, it's interesting. And let's add to that really quick, Adam, because we did talk about this early in the year. And for those who missed some Horizon talk, we were talking about IU Indy an awful lot early this year because of the pace of that offense. Some Horizon League chatter, but Doug Gottlieb gave up the radio, the podcast or whatever, right, to become a full-time head coach is what, when he made that decision, like mid-December, little toward the end of December, maybe. I remember big press conference. I'm going to commit myself to this team. And since then, I mean, it was starting to get good then. It's been a little bit better since then for him. Cleveland State on a decent run. Let's just go back to the first game played between these two, where Green Bay ran Cleveland State out of the gym at Cleveland State, 88-73. Green Bay shot 50% from the three-point mark in that one, 15 of 30, 70% from two-point range. So you're talking about 29 of 50 for the game from the floor, 15 of 17 from the free throw line. Just absolutely shot lights out in that particular game. Question would be, can they repeat it here at home against Cleveland State? And I kind of don't see why not, Adam, to tell you the truth. I mean, if you can win by 15 on the road, and Cleveland State, let's give them a little bit of credit here. They're on a 2-game win streak and playing a little bit better, but now you come into the opposing gym. There was a point where 7.5, laying 7.5 with Green Bay would look like a ton to lay, but Green Bay, for what it's worth, has gone through a couple of games here where they've been able to do so. I'm not sure that I would lay it myself, but I am pretty sure that I would play total here. Both sides are fairly high scoring. The Wisconsin Green Bay side has tried to slow down tempo a little bit. But the problem for Green Bay, and remember, with these tempo numbers, you got to look at both ends of the floor. They give up shots rather quickly. They're slow on their end, slow and methodical, but they're fast on the other end, and Cleveland State likes to pick up pace. So I could see pace here. Cleveland State's played 3 games, 4, 5, 6, 5 games in a row now that have exceeded this total, which just tells me that they're a certain style at this point in time. So for me, it would probably be more of an against the grain look at this total going over rather than inside. First game does hit 161. Green Bay showed no problem dissecting that defense of Cleveland State. So for me, I think I would look that way, Adam. Didn't play it on the card, but I think I would look toward game going over here. Should be a nice night in that building for UWGB.
Yeah, like this is another one kind of similar to St. Louis for me, where it's like, I don't know if it's kind of a bad number. Like in my opinion, you're being asked to lay quite a bit, but I also think sometimes the books shade in this regard when they kind of like want you to stay away from a certain side, right? Like when they're they're almost like enticing you to take the dog in a little bit, because that's literally what they're doing. They're shading, right? They're like, we'd prefer your money to be on Cleveland State here. We don't really want you cashing your ticket with Green Bay, so we're going to make it tougher for you to do so. How did Cleveland State beat Wright State over the weekend? I'm sorry, last Wednesday. So it's been 9 days since Cleveland State played, and I got to be honest, Rob, that one I either forgot about it or missed that. But their first road win, they were 0-9 on the road going into the Wright State game, and they won it as a 16-point underdog outright. Like, I don't know how that happened. And it followed them knocking off Youngstown State. I believe they were like an 8-point dog in that game. So I don't think Cleveland State just magically figured it out. That my gut would say that those two were, maybe a couple of big favorites, kind of maybe not taking Cleveland State as serious as they should have. But I'll go back to that point. Cleveland State 1-9 on the road. This team, of course, is very much in a rebuild. Danielle Robinson took the North Texas job. So Cleveland State is starting over with pretty much nothing. I expected them to be one of the worst teams in the horizon this year. And up until a week ago, when they miraculously won 2 games as a huge underdog, they looked just like that. So my concern for Cleveland State and why they're so bad on the road, they're going to turn the ball over like crazy. They've been doing that all season. There's no way they win this game, Rob. There's just no way. They can't win again as a huge underdog on the road when they were 0-9 before the Wright State upset. So my gut says Green Bay probably wins this by double digits. They figured it out in the second half of that game in the first meeting. That was a 3-point game at halftime, and I think Green Bay dropped 50 in the second half and ended up winning by like 15. So not going to make my card because I think it's a kind of a crazy number to lay if you're in the numbers not teams camp again. But if we're talking matchups, Green Bay at home, Cleveland State having to go on the road, Cleveland State 1-9 on the road off of 2 big upset wins, I think Green Bay might have them, down double digits early in this game, and I don't know if they can come back from that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much changes from that first outing. And for what it's worth, again, I'll just repeat, Cleveland State's 5-0 to the over their last 5 games. And it's not close to this 151 that we're looking at here tonight.
Yeah, Bayou makes a good point. Sometimes it's having a week off helps, like when you're super banged up or you need a reset. When you don't want 9 days off is after you've just beat 2 of the best teams in the league, right? If you beat 2 of the best teams in the league, you're playing good ball, Rob. What happens? You have a 9-day break, and then you have to go on the road where you're 1-9. So yeah, that doesn't seem like the best situation for what I consider to still be a bad Cleveland State team. And what Brian Power will tell you is a I believe he called them deplorable earlier this year. He goes to he was at one of those Cleveland State games. I think he might have been at the Youngstown State game. That arena is like 15 minutes from his house. So yeah, not a good team, not someone that's going to get my money right here. All right, we have hit the hour mark. Rob and I will be back tomorrow on Last Call, the babysitter version. Kelly in Vegas keeping us on task. We go quick. That's not the deep dive show. That's just rattle off opinions. There's 100 games. So we'll be doing that tomorrow. Today, we're trying to get back to even on the parlay. We're also just trying to keep it going. I've had a really good week so far. I think I've had a good month. I'm up close to 30 units in January, which is much needed because I did not have a good November or December. So I'm getting it back this month as I hoped I would. I'll go as far as to say, Rob, that I thought I would. And now here we are kind of cashing some tickets. So check our package out, double the CBB firepower. You get everything I play, everything Rob plays for a 3-day stretch, any 3-day stretch. And without further ado, the parlay of the day is Princeton plus 5.5. And then Rob Vino's going with Sacred Heart team total over 73.5. Hopefully another 2-team winner. We'll see you guys in the morning. Good luck, everyone. Cash your tickets. We'll see you guys tomorrow on Last Call.